Good morning and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share this program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. Make sure in both cases that you hit the notification button. That way you can get the notifications as soon as we go live and participate in the live chat as the show is going on. Also, take a minute, visit FPCgear.com. That's FPCgear.com. It is the place to go to find Pro 2A swag. T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, stickers, you name it. We've got it at FPCgear.com. And the best part about it is every dollar that you spend is going right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's FPCgear.com. All right, once again, you guys know I'm here in the state of, I like to call it California, but California, the place we are behind the Iron Curtain when it comes to civil rights, in particular when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. And California politicians go out of their minds coming up with new and interesting ways to infringe upon our fundamental rights. Well, one individual from the city of San Jose, decided that he wanted to come up with an idea that I think that many of you are going to find laughable, if not, how shall we say, enraging. So to discuss that, we have Mr. George Lee, a legal counsel for the Firearms Policy Coalition, to talk about what the city of, or the mayor of San Jose is proposing. George, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, Craig. And as you know, something being laughable or enraging has never been a deterrent to politicians, particularly in this state when it comes to firearms, right? So, you know, no surprises here, but they're on to their next sort of wacky idea.
Well, and, you know, this was one that, well, okay, so I'm a big believer in the idea of if you, in particular, if you conceal carry or if you have a firearm, you need to carry additional insurance in order to kind of protect yourself. But I think there's a big difference between what the mayor of San Francisco is proposing when he talks about mandating liability insurance for all gun owners. Can you kind of explain a little bit about what the mayor is proposing, and then we can get into why this is such a bad idea?
I don't know that I can really explain what he has in mind because, to be honest, it's sort of a moving target. And the rationale for this proposal is sort of all over the map. But it started off about a week ago in which the mayor of San Jose, Sam Liccardo, put out a press release indicating his proposal to make all firearm owners in the city of San Jose to carry what he called mandatory liability insurance for gun owners. And it was intended ostensibly to address the, quote, problem of gun violence. And using that label, clearly there's an inference that gun violence is referring to intentional acts, right? When we talk about gun violence, we're not talking about accidental shootings or anything like that. We're talking about violent acts, obviously, which is right. Part of the problem. So he's saying on the one hand, you have to have liability insurance if you're a gun owner, but it's also intended to address the, quote, problem of gun violence. So the two don't really go hand in hand because in the first place, and I think everyone recognizes this, you cannot insure against intentional criminal acts.
Wow, look at you! You're going all legal geek on me now.
Well, but
I like that. I like that.
True, but I think that most people understand that you can't really.
I do, yeah.
And it's a matter of public policy. It's right there in the California Insurance Code, Section 533. You cannot have an insurer be liable to. For the criminal acts or the willful acts of the insured, because that just basically underwrites criminal activity, and that there's no way that public policy is going to, and no court's going to ever let that fly. So in the first place, you cannot have mandatory insurance to insure against your own possibility that you might engage in some type of gun violence. So in the first place, I think everyone recognizes that, and the mayor is an attorney, so he must know this instinctively. So then I guess he's pivoting, saying, well, okay, it's not really intended to address gun violence, but we want somehow for people to pay for the costs of the public costs associated with gun injuries. But again, we're not talking about intentional acts. Those certainly, again, cannot be insured against. So what we're really talking about is requiring you to carry liability insurance for accidental shootings. That's the only thing that it could possibly be referring to. And I would say that this is essentially a problem in search of a solution in search of a problem, because there really is no problem as far as accidental shootings is concerned.
Right. As I understand it, accidental shootings are actually at an all-time record low in the United States.
That's correct. If you look at the latest statistics from the National Shooting Sports Foundation, I think they did a study in 2017. It shows that accidental firearm fatalities fell to 489 out of something like 146,000 fatalities in the United States altogether. That's 0.3%. And it, by the way, it also happens to be an all-time low for firearm fatalities at the same time that firearm ownership is at an all-time high. So clearly, the education, the training that people are going out there and getting for themselves with regard to firearms, particularly new firearms owners, they're the responsible ones. They're the ones that are getting training. They're the ones that are learning how to do this. And as a result, firearm fatalities are at an all-time low. But if you listen to, back to the point, if you listen to Mayor Liccardo, you'd think that there was this major problem with firearm fatalities and that there's a major problem that gun owners are somehow underinsured. It's simply not the case.
Well, all right, so now picture me this, or explain to me this. So I'm going to commit a crime. Maybe I'm not legally allowed to get a gun, to own a gun, so I go out and I illegally buy a gun. Obviously, I'm going to make sure that it's on the roster, and I'm going to make sure that the magazine holds the appropriate number of rounds. But what's the likelihood that I'm actually going to go get insurance?
Well, that's exactly the absurdity of it. The mayor, again, in his third pivot, said, well, we know it's not going to eliminate all violence, all gun violence. But we think that this proposal is going to basically price high-risk individuals out of gun ownership, because carriers will refuse to write a policy for, quote, high-risk individuals.
Well, now you bring up a very interesting point. So when you start talking about high risk, for people who live in areas where there is a significant amount of gun violence, one would guess, and I think before we came on the show, you talked about the fact that underwriters are going to look at geographical issues and they're going to say, well, so people who live in certain areas are going to be considered high risk and likely will not be able to get the insurance, right?
Sure. Well, yes, and that's exactly right. Underwriters they're just going to look at statistics. They're going to say, okay, well, you live in this zip code, and according to our actuarial data, people who live in this zip code are more likely to be involved in some type of criminal activity or something, whatever their criteria is. And so they're going to basically price those people who live in those zip codes are. What I think we can guess what the effect of that is going to be. It's basically going to mean that law-abiding people from certain neighborhoods are going to be considered higher risk and are going to have to pay substantially higher premiums under this plan if it was even to go forward, basically pricing them out and making it so that they cannot afford to own firearms. But in the meantime, of course, the actual criminal, right, who is going to go out there and commit a crime with a gun is, in the first place, is probably prohibited already,
right?
Because they're a felon or otherwise prohibited. And so, and I'm thinking that a person who's already prohibited and is going to commit a crime with a gun, I think an insurance liability requirement that they're not able to keep up with is probably the least of their concerns.
Right.
and is not going to matter at all to those people.
Well, and so in essence, what you're talking about is people who are law-abiding citizens are going to be priced out of the ability to exercise their constitutional right. In essence, what this amounts to almost is up like a poll tax.
Well, that's by design. I agree, and that's by design, because at the end of the day, they don't really care about the right. In fact, they have disdain for the right, and they want to reduce the right. And all you have to do is look at the way they talk about this proposal by likening it to tobacco use. When they say that, well, we do it with tobacco, right? We tax smokers because they cause more public health issues and public health costs. So we feel entitled to tax smokers out. Well, it's the same way that this same mentality is the way that they view firearms ownership. They see it as a right only begrudgingly because it's written in the Constitution. But if it wasn't for that, they're trying to basically cast it as some type of vice that needs to be taxed out of existence. And we all know that that's their goal, is to change as Eric Holder said, brainwash people into thinking that gun ownership is some type of vice and needs to be taxed out of existence. But, the difference between smoking, the difference between automobile insurance and firearms ownership, of course, among many other things, is that firearms ownership is a constitutional right. So they're going to have to do a lot more than just string together a couple of, unrelated policy goals that are totally unrelated to the proposal that they're giving in order to justify it.
It's interesting to me that just how clearly wrong, illegal, and unconstitutional to me, or to many people, such a proposal is, and I'm more than willing to bet that their city attorney, if they are any good at their job, is going to point these things out, and yet they're going to push forward with the proposal anyway. I've seen it happen in the California legislature, and the thing that gets me is, the Second Amendment exists for the idea for us to help protect us against tyrannical governments, and when you have government entities that flat out ignore the law and do what they want to do, one then has to wonder, they become the very government that they say, well, the Second Amendment doesn't exist to prevent against.
Sure. And they're not going to necessarily come out and just be, reveal their true tyrant in self overnight. They're just going to do it by 1,000 paper cuts, right? And
exactly.
This is just another thing. And you have to think that Mayor Liccardo, who is a lawyer, understands that this is just not going to fly in terms of the legal justification for it. There is going to be a challenge, and that we will bring a lawsuit on this if this proposal is enacted in any way, shape, or form. So they have to know that the legal action is coming. Okay. But in the name of trying to do something, in the face of the most recent incidents like in Gilroy, which they admit this proposal would have done absolutely nothing to affect that incident. But notwithstanding that admission, they feel like they have to justify themselves and that they have to be doing something. And I understand that they have constituents to answer for and concerned and frightened. But part of being an elected official in the United States is that you have to understand that you're dealing within a framework of rights, and you can't just start trampling over people's rights just because you're under a lot of pressure to do so.
Right. Well, and you want
to hear my proposal?
I'm sorry.
You want to hear my proposal?
I want to hear your proposal.
To this following up on this idea that they know clearly, Mayor Liccardo knows that this is unconstitutional, is likely to engender a legal challenge. My proposal is this: if Mayor Liccardo believes that this is something that he really wants to do and really wants to push, notwithstanding the risk to the city of San Jose for the legal liability and the legal fees that the city is going to be liable for, Mayor Liccardo should be willing to post a personal surety bond of at least $1 million of against his own liability for the legal fees that the city of San Jose may be liable for to California Gun Rights Foundation, FPC, and any other groups that file suit, so that if there is an award of attorney's fees against the city, it would have to come out of that personal surety bond. Because the way I see it, if he's requiring all law-abiding gun owners to have some type of liability insurance based on the acts of others, all right? At the very least, he should be willing to put a personal surety bond if his insane proposal is found to be unconstitutional.
Right, because ultimately the taxpayers in the city of San Jose are the ones that are going to have to foot the bill when his proposal is found to be illegal and unconstitutional.
Exactly. I mean, basically, it's the same thing that he's requiring of gun owners, right? So what's good for the goose is
well, except in this case, he's insuring his own actions.
Yes, that's true. It's more directly related for sure.
Right. Well, hey, fantastic. Well, George, thank you so much. Where can folks follow more information about what's going on with whether it's this lawsuit or other lawsuits relating to the Second Amendment that you're working on?
Well, I think staying in tune and plugged in with FPC through its website is the best way to keep in touch with all of these developments and all of the legal cases that we have going on right now. And certainly, if they do move forward with this proposal in San Jose, I'm sure FPC will be the first to let its members know about it.
You can bet we will. Once again, George, thank you so much for coming on the program. It is always a pleasure and always informative.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, take care, sir. All right, folks. Well, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.